Hi, welcome to a Roboflow training movie. This is actually a What's New movie for Cumulus 10.2.5. In this movie I will show you what is new in this 10.2.5 release and give a little bit more explanation about the new version. First of all, if you have Roboflow running, you can check what version it is by going to the show log and go to version info. This tells you what version of web interface you have running, and the latest version is 10.2.33, so it might even show up as 10.2.31 on your screen. This is the last change and was done for the 10.2.3 release, but this is the web interface. Roboflow, the main part of Roboflow is the Roboflow service, is the backend, and the backend there are a couple of new functionalities and bug fixes that we are going to take a look at. First of all, going back to 10.2.3, when 10.2.3 was released, there was support introduced for SFTP with host keys. In the past, this was SFTP was available, but without host keys or without using certificates. So from 10.2.3, and you could see that in the What's New version of the workflow, the movie, there was explained that you could use SFTP. In the 10.2.4 release, there was a little build mistake, which made the SFTP or even FTP impossible in the 10.2.4. So if you have a 10.2.4, you will notice that as soon as you try to use FTP or SFTP, that it will fail. The reason for it is that in the wrapper conf folder, in the wrapper conf of your workflow, which if you have a look in Roboflow 10.2.4, in the conf folder here in the wrapper, there is a list of all the jars that is used in this version, and in this release there was a mentioning of SFTP 8.7.1. This is, however, the old library, while in the lib the already new library 9.3.8 was present here. So if you have a 10.2.4, just go to the wrapper conf, edit it and change it into this name, and your FTP will work again. In this new release 10.5, in 10.5 the lib is of course present, so the SFTP 9.3.8, which is the latest version which supports SFTP with host keys, and you will notice that also your wrapper conf will have that particular library mentioned correctly. So here SFTP. So that is fixed in 10.2.3, and it's an easy fix in 10.2.4 if you need it. Then let's go to the next one. So that said, then in Roboflow, when you have a hot folder or a watch folder workflow, you have a file filter. The file filter gives you the opportunity to include or exclude file formats. There is, however, an additional test, which is internally called isCleanFileName. Sometimes in mixed environments, it happens that illegal characters sneak into file names, like a colon, a slash, a backslash, a star, so an asterisk, or even a carriage return or a return, a line feed gets into the name. These are characters that cause cataloging problems. Very often the file cannot even be presented correctly in your browser, but it definitely will cause cataloging errors. So there is an clean file name specification. However, in the previous version up to 10.2.3, this isClean file name was only executed if you also specified a file filter. If you did not specify a file filter, it did not check if the file name was clean, which could still cause cataloging problems for files which had invalid characters in their name. So this too has been fixed in the 10.2.5 release. The next bug fix is that since 10.2.3 you were able to create fields in the Cumulus catalog. It was something that was re-enabled from the past and implemented, but you were not able to create table fields or you were not able to create fields inside a table field. And that is something that too has been fixed. So if we look here at a workflow that is called create fields, and in this workflow I can go and have a look into the drop field to create. And so I'm going to my Canto Roboflow drop field to create. I have a little example parameter file. This is just an example, so this is not the syntax of how you add fields. This is just an implementation. This is a tab limit text file, and in the first column I have the catalog name. In the second column I'm specifying what I am creating. And so if you are creating something in a record, you should specify record. If the main element item is a record item, then it should be called record. Category, record table, and category table. So in this example, I'm creating a field of a type string. And in the first example, I'm creating just a record field. This is something that existed. Category field, something that existed. And what is new is test table is actually the name of the table field, and if it doesn't exist, it will create it. If it does exist, it will just add fields to it. And the field that I'm going to create is test from Peter, and that's a record table. And so I'm adding here as an example 2 fields to the record table called test table. And finally, I'm also creating a category table field also called test table, but with only 1 field in it. So in the workflow itself, if I show you how it works, it actually reads that little parameter file, and then it processes all the lines in that parameter file, and it stores the different values in a separate variable. Maybe you've never noticed this syntax before, but if you process a row of a table, then internally this row is an array. Or a string list, like you could call it, with element 1, element 2, element 3, for each column an element in that little array. So you can pick up, and because it's a process, the output variable is called, for instance, field to create. Well, this means that in the workflow, an array will be stored under the tag field to create. If you want to access that, there is an instruction, an action that says store column from array, from row, or you could just do an inline instruction where you use the name of that tag, and then like you would do in Java, for instance, as a syntax, you would say give me element number 1. It's 1 based, it's not 0 based, so the first element of the array is 1, the second is 2, etc., etc. A little bit later in this training movie, I will tell you that you now also have the ability to say -1, which means that this is the last element, -2 is the second but last element, etc., etc. So you can that way not only get to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but you could do last -1, last -2, etc. So -1 is the last one, etc. So that's how I store this thing. And if I show you the instruction, so the instruction is create field in catalog. I pick a catalog, which must be open. And then you have the options that you specified in you can also hard code, select them here, editable, sortable, searchable. Or you can pick them up from your table. These are the formats that it supports today. So you can get all of these in your list. And then item type is it for a record table? Is it for a category table? Is it a record or is it a category? And so what is the main item? And then a field name that you specify. It will return you as an output the GUID. You know, every unique field has an internal number, which is called a UID. Well, this UID, it will return that, so you could maybe use it further down the road in your workflow. So I have a catalog. I'm just using the sample catalog, and in the sample catalog, I don't have any particular things in there. So if I look for test, there is no field called test in here. So if I close this and I go to my workflow and I say start, then you can do a show log, and in the logging I output what I've done. So I say field to create is all this, and then it returns the GUID. So that's how you can be sure that it was a valid creation of a field. We can check this in the catalog. So if I go to the catalog settings, record, and I do test, then you can see that there is a string field here, and there is also a table here. And in the table, there are two fields. A table field always has these two. The host ID references to the record, and the ID is a unique number of this record, of this item in the table. And then the two fields that I added additionally. So same for the category fields. Here you see test from Peter and test table, which only will have one because there was only one. So that's just an example of how that works. A little extra information, nothing related, is that this is an example of a workflow that I made that is going to execute a parameter file that is in my hot folder. Normal procedure is that it will delete afterwards that file. But because I added this little tag with the value false, it tells the workflow not to delete it. So I can execute this 20 times and it will execute 20 times that same file or files, whatever is dropped in that folder. So that way you could keep a workflow having a starting point that is inside some parameters in your parameter file, and that makes it, of course, easy to you can see catalog, image type, content, name, options. So this way you can drive a workflow to do stuff based on a parameter file. So that's enough about this bug fix. So now it also supports tables. The next one I'm not going to show is that when you were exporting a record, there are two types of formats that you can use. There is the old Cumulus 5 style format. I think it was called .cfe in the past, or CRE, and that was a record export which had a undefined format, but then in Cumulus 8 XML was introduced, and there was an XML style format export. Now the export functionality had a problem detecting the difference, so that bug is fixed, so it will now always export the correct version that you ask it to export. You might be wondering why this is updating all the time. The screen is live, and every 30 seconds it will show me the feedback from the logging of the workflow. Next item here is a native duplicate record. So you have an action where you can duplicate a record. Well, that action was not taking into consideration vocabulary fields, so that is also something that has been fixed. And then open table, that is an important one. In Roboflow, you have the ability to process table records. So you could have a category table field and the items in there can be processed. You can open it, it becomes a collection behind the scenes, an item collection, and you process item per item. The same for records. But there is a use for it that it might be useful if you have an item table, a table field, let's say the asset usage history, that instead of having to go to each record, pick up the individual values of that table and then process it, it would be, or it is, much easier and necessary to be able to address them directly, because it is behind the scenes a table inside your catalog that contains all that information. The link of each item to the record is the host item ID. So instead of having to process a record and then get to the table field and then get to the values of that table field one by one, you can directly now open a table field of a catalog, and then you can launch a query against it and process the items that you want to process. That saves a lot of processing time. A little example of what the workflow here does is this workflow has a catalog parameter which I added, and it has also a query that I want to launch. Mind you, I'm starting from a hot folder workflow. I cannot start from a hot collection workflow, but a hot collection workflow will query a catalog for records. So I cannot use that. I'm using a hot folder. And I'm using actually the drop folder from the previous workflow, in which I say that I don't want to delete the files in there. But I'm actually also not going to do anything with it. It's just to have a starting point. There's a file there, I know, which will never be deleted. So my workflow will always be processing this once, and then it will execute the logic that I've added here. Don't care about that drop folder. I care about what I want to do here. And what I want to do here is I open the catalog. I open the table field, and this is the new instruction, open table field. Instead of open record table field or open category table field, I'm opening a table field without having a record or without having a category. So now it allows me to use this functionality, process table field records, so the items in your table, and I can have a query. So I can say, give me, for instance, anything added in the past 7 hours, or the past year, or the past so many days, etc., etc. So my query here says now in the past 24 hours. So I could do, let's do 48 hours, and then it will get from a specific table field. And which table field did I choose? Well, I said the asset usage history. Maybe it might have been easier to understand if I had the field name in here. And so it's always a better practice in a workflow to have the field. So let's call this table field, and to have that in or outside the workflow. So not in the logic, but in the parameters. And that way you never run into any surprises when you need to process something, when something changes, like the field name changes, where did I use it? If you have to go and look for that in every instruction in an action script, then you're you have a lot of work. So let's have a look here. I'm using this table field now to open this, and I'm going to execute that workflow. So where's the workflow? Process table items. Start. And if I do show log, I can see that it finds the user, the date, the usage, and any other information that might be in your table. What I also additionally in this workflow like to show you, one of the other tickets, is that there was a problem getting to in Cumulus, getting to some user information. You had an action that could store user information, but that was causing some problems. So it, for instance, could not give you the right name. So I've just added here a preview entry, and you might have seen that I got an error message here. What I'm doing is I'm picking up the last record that it finds, picking up the user, and then trying to get some more information from that user. Of course, this user is the Cumulus administrator, and the Cumulus administrator doesn't have an email or doesn't have roles, so it just gives me a message saying, sorry, I cannot get you the first name and the last name of the Cumulus administrator. But I just did a little preview. So, oh yeah, and stupid of me, I did it as the Cumulus administrator again. So let me quickly log into the Cumulus client, and let's not use the Cumulus administrator. But let's use somebody else. Surprise, surprise. And if I now open the catalog and I do a preview, for instance, of this one, preview window, this will automatically in the asset usage history trigger a new preview entry. So here at the bottom, that was me previewing it. So in the feedback, in the list of things that it should give me in the workflow, I can say that maybe I only want from the last hour to give me a smaller export. Here we go. And then I do start. Show log. Oh, that's the wrong one. Show log. Okay. What you see is that I'm asking for the UID of a user, and I'm using the login. I'm asking for the name, and it gives me the name like this. I'm getting the email, etc., etc. So I can get individual field names, and so you can now, in the past you could ask for UID, name, CN. CN is in case it's an LDAP user, Active Directory, email, roles. All those things existed in the past. What is new is that you now can also specify the GUID, the unique ID of a field of the user database. So of the user catalog, the $users catalog. So you can get to individual fields of a specific user, picking up information about that user, address, or what other stuff that might be interesting for you to use in the workflow. So that too is a new functionality that has been fixed, somewhere between fixed and new. So this is for store user info, same for store LDAP info. It also offers you a little bit more options to get information from the LDAP server. This is not store LDAP info is not using the LDAP settings of Cumulus. This is just using the direct call to LDAP. Then the next fix is the fact that when you specify a folder filter, that you now have a new parameter to set, which is level 5. Level and then a number. You can decide that a hot folder, when it's processing files, should not go deeper than a certain level. That certain level being example 5 subfolders deep. So that way you could limit, if you have a fixed folder structure, you could avoid that your process goes too deep, and maybe you have some kind of folders that keep older versions and you don't want those older version folders, subfolders to be processed. Well, this is a way to do it. Then using a thumbnail, you can set a thumbnail and you can read the value from a thumbnail. You could in the past already use JPEG to set a thumbnail. Now for some file formats, not a JPEG but a PNG is used, sometimes like for EPSs, etc., to have transparency and that kind of stuff. So in that case, this was giving an error. If you were trying to set a PNG, then you would have a problem. So now it also supports PNGs. Let me give you a little example. Let's go to the drop. Let's first check where the drop folder is. The drop folder is called drop thumbnail. So let's go to the drop thumbnail folder. Okay, so let me throw this one away. And let's go here to the catalog. Oh, I shouldn't have thrown that away. Maybe I can still do Ctrl Z. I have prepared an alternate thumbnail for a record called camels in PNG, .png, and so it's for this one. So if I execute the workflow, it will actually pick up that, it will actually set a new thumbnail. This functionality can, for instance, be used to add a watermark. Imagine that you perform an action and get a thumbnail, an exported JPEG or PNG that contains a thumbnail, and that you could assign to your thumbnail field. So I have here workflow that assigns that file to a field, to the thumbnail field. You could even have a second field, a second picture field in your catalog, and that second field could be the one that you show internally, while you can also set your original thumbnail to have a watermark. That way you could have watermarks in your thumbnails in portals, for instance. Here you see that it finds camel in India, and it finds the record camels in India.mov, a movie. And if we go to the catalog, now we notice that the thumbnail has been rotated 90%. Just an example. It could have been a watermark or anything else. So this is how you can set a thumbnail. Has always existed, or already for a long time, but now you can also use PNGs. Let's move on to the next. The next item is the fact that you can call a URL, and that will save the result to a file name. In the past, the file name had to be specified by you, or if you did not, it would just give a generic file name. Now, if you use this functionality, it will actually try to ask the content of the result for the file name. And if it is stored in there, it's not always the case, but if it is stored in it, then it will be able to store the file with its proper name. Not gonna show this, it's just use the call URL save to file, and don't specify an output folder instead of specifying the output file. in the same perspective, and that is something I'm going to show you, or in the same area, for this same action, there has been a functionality added which is called URL header. In a URL call, you can set header values, and some browsers nowadays do not accept any calls anymore from a website, sorry, from anything, if there is not a valid user agent set in it. So by default, if you do not specify anything in your workflow, it will set this value. But you can change it, and so you can have the name of the URL parameter that you want to set, 2 hashes, and then the value of the parameter that you want to be set for that parameter name. In this case, I'm just saying user-agent, so it will set in the header of the URL call the user agent. This might be necessary for some of your calls to some websites. If you leave it empty, it will set nothing. So it could be that you want to set a null value, that you do not want it to use the default value. Then you just leave this part empty and you store this string. And this is an internal variable, so you need to be calling it exactly this, and that's what it's going to look for. If it does not exist, if you did not specify it, it will by default set this value. If you do specify it, you can set it to whatever you like. Make sure that you do set it to valid values. Next is the ability to set for a watch folder a top level prefix. A top level meaning that if you set a folder filter, that it only applies to the top level. Anything underneath, it doesn't care. Once it gets in a folder, it accepts anything in that folder from the folder filter. And so if you have a folder filter which starts with an exclamation mark log, let's say final, then it looks in your hot folder and it will only process what is in a subfolder called final. But if it has subfolders, it will not look in those subfolders. If you do want it to look in those subfolders, you just prefix it with a question mark. Then if you have been working some time with Roboflow, you will have noticed that for records or catalogs or items of an SQL table or even parts of a split text, anything that has a loop and that executes instructions in that loop offers you a very nice functionality to have some actions executed on a result of a couple of items or records or categories, etc. The problem with that functionality was that it did not check or listen to any stop requests. So if a user wanted to stop that workflow, if that process was in that particular loop of going through the records, which could be thousands of records, so which could be a process that takes hours, it would ignore or not know about that specific question, that specific call. So now this is a bug fix that it does know if such a call comes in, and it does stop the loop. So you now have that capability. You might say, I don't interrupt my workflows that many times. True, but Roboflow should always be installed with a daily restart. Imagine that you have a very long process running and it's not interrupted by the interruption call done by the stop script, then you might have problems. So that's something that is avoided by this bug fix, and the bug fix will know if it's processing a loop of files, a loop of records, process the records of a collection, etc., etc. All those loops that you could create yourself inside a workflow script will now also, when they go to the next instruction, when they go to the next item of the loop, then it will check if it still should do it or if there was an interruption requested. I already explained the fact that you can get from an array a number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 has always existed, but now you can also say -1, which will give you the last one, -2, -3, etc., etc. So it actually gives you the ability to invert the processing of your row or just get the last one. Then there were some improvements made on working with collections. First of all, the creation of a collection had a bug in it. In the creation of a collection, you did not have the ability to specify a name. And in the creation of a pin collection, you did not have the ability to specify the records. So both problems have been fixed. I will show you in the workflow. So if I have here a workflow, create pin collection, and you can specify, I have a general variable here that I use. So if you have in the save pin collection now a new element called records for collection. Be careful if you have an old script where you added this action already, this will not suddenly appear. You have to remove your old action and add the new one again, and then you will see that you have this record for collection, and you can specify the records. The format is catalog ID underscore record ID, and then a comma, and then again a catalog ID underscore record ID. So that way you can process the loop of some records, and you can process a result of a query. It ends up with 20 records. Well, you pick up from each record the catalog ID, record ID, and you concatenate it as a string, like I do here. And you just have a parameter that you initialize in the beginning of your workflow. You call it global because it has to exist across the processing of all your records. And then you start by picking up that old value, if it existed, and you ask for the catalog ID and the record ID, and those two tags, of course, have to be created first. And so this is storing a record field value being the ID, and storing the catalog field value, catalog ID here. Okay, so new parameter there, and additionally here as well. Here in this save collection, the name of the collection, if you can call it whatever you like, but if it's already existing, it will crash the older version of it. It will overwrite the previous version. Same for a normal collection. If you want to save a normal collection, could be a normal collection, a basket collection, or an upload collection, then this will also use this specific catalog name. And again, here you can specify the records. And by doing this, you get as a result, you get the name of the catalog or the GUID if you choose to have a GUID. And so if you specify as a name GUID, it will create a cumulus GUID for you for that particular name, to make sure that it is unique. And for some collections, like pin collections, they don't actually have a name. You just give it, because you don't have the ability to give it a name, then you can just have it a GUID. But you can give it a real name as well, and it's up to you. But that's what has been fixed. And so both instructions in the past, the save collection did not have the name of the collection, and the save pin collection did not have the records of the collection. So if you leave here this empty, then it will pick up all the records of the collection that you specified. So that's something that has been solved with this latest Cumulus version 10.2.5. And then finally, old collection files were stored as real files, or old collections in Cumulus as CFEs, because those have been deprecated and now we are using collections. We have now the ability to, with 3 new actions, process collections, delete collections, and set collection name, set collection description, and so set collection value. You have the ability to work with your collections. Imagine your users having, if I have a look here in this workflow, I have a hot folder workflow with a parameter file, and in that parameter file I specify, for instance, the user that I want to process. This example, first column is how I want to call it. The second is actually the real user. If you don't specify a name, it will take the user of which that is running Roboflow. So if I have a look at this workflow, what does it do? It actually reads that parameter file and then processes row by row, and it stores column number 2 as what we will be searching for, and it asks for the user name. And so it goes for store user info, it picks up the name of the user, and it will output that into your log, and it will say this is the user that we're going to process. And then what it is going to do is this collection, you can either specify the login of the user or not. If you don't specify it, it takes the user that is running this Roboflow, which is in this example the Cumulus administrator, or you can specify a real username like I did here, Peter. Now this process gives me each collection, and I can get the collection information from it, and I can output it, and I have instructions that can set values, like I can set a description to a collection, or I can say, okay, this collection is older than this or that, so I'm going to delete it. You can update collections, modify them, add them, and save them again. And so all this is now possible. I have a little example. So I'm starting this workflow, and this workflow will output all the collections for a certain this is still in debug mode, so not very useful. I'm going to change this back to the normal logging so that it only outputs what we really want to see. And if we do a show log, I can see that it finds a collection with this name. It has these records in it, so it can tell you which records that are in it. And so you can see it can give you a lot of information from that specific workflow. And so anything, so this is a pin collection, as you can see, the creation date, the modification date, and all the information can be outputted. And so, but it can not only be outputted, it can also, and so here's a normal collection, for instance, and so all this information can potentially also be changed. And so you can decide to change values in such a collection by an action called set collection value. So here I have an example somewhere where I'm trying to here set a description. So here this action is called set collection property value, and then which user, and It can spoof the user. For that, it's important that Roboflow is running as a user that is allowed to spoof other users and pretend being other users. And it can that way pick up a certain catalog name and a certain description. It can set, for instance, the description of a certain collection. So that is what this workflow can do for you, or this action can do for you. Another example is a deletion. So all you need to do is specify the user, the name of the collection, and you can delete a collection, which then is removed forever from your collections. So you could say, okay, any collections older than 2 years, older than 1 year, older than 30 days, you can find them and you can delete them. That way you don't end up with thousands and thousands of collections. So this was the last feature that I wanted to explain. So these are all the fixes that you will find in the current release. If you have any questions, just let me know, and otherwise see you in another training movie.